So let's get started. Uh, Everyone, my name is Helitz Villegas. My pronouns are she, her, or ella in Espanol. I manage the Forced Marriage Initiative at the Tahereh Justice Center. And joining me today is my wonderful colleague, Brianna Roberts, who is the associate with our program. And in just a few slides, Brianna will introduce herself a bit more and share more about her work. Again, this webinar is just 1 hour. It will be recorded and we will have time for Q&A at the end. And we are always available for any one-on-one training, technical assistance, questions, anything else you would like to discuss related to the issue of forced marriage. Happy to set time and have those one-on-one discussions or potentially a part two if folks would like for us to expand more on this topic. The Tahereh Justice Center is a national nonprofit. Our bread and butter is really providing legal services to immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. And so we provide this legal relief at our 5 offices. We have an office in California, an office in Texas, in Georgia, Maryland, and Brianna and I are seated in our Virginia, DC office, which covers areas of DC, parts of Maryland, and parts of Virginia. Our approach is interdisciplinary in that in-house, we offer the legal services while we're also providing social services with the hopes that we are providing folks with a one-stop shop to really receive all of the care that those we serve truly deserve. And so if you are in one of our service areas, if you are working with individuals who could benefit from trauma-informed legal representation, or you yourself are an attorney or would like more information on working with immigrant survivors, please feel free to contact us for more on that and ways that perhaps we can partner. This training is not going to be discussing legal or our social services as it relates to the work that we do with immigrant survivors. We are going to be focused on the program, the Forced Marriage Initiative, which again is the program that I have the privilege of managing. And we actually provide services to individuals who do have lawful status, meaning that immigration is not their main concern, but they still have the threat of a forced marriage or they're still impacted by forced marriage. And our program serves individuals of all ages, of all backgrounds, anywhere in the United States. And sometimes that means individuals who may have been taken to other countries for the purposes of a forced marriage. And so, again, our program is serving individuals all over the nation. And if you are working with someone who perhaps could be impacted by forced marriage, please feel free to contact us for that additional training, technical assistance, that one-on-one support, or perhaps to refer that individual to us directly. We are more than happy to provide expertise on the issue of forced marriage and co-case manage cases if that is something that the individual you may be serving could benefit from. And so that's a little bit about Tahereh, about the Forced Marriage Initiative. And now I'm going to pass it to my wonderful colleague, Brianna, to share more about forced marriage, what we mean, and the work that she does day in and day out with those we serve. Bri, I'm passing it to you.
Thank you, Halit. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Roberts. I use she, her pronouns. I've been with Tahereh for about 4 years now, and I'm the primary case worker, so working directly with individuals who are impacted by forced marriage. Before we begin, we would like to note that we're going to be using gendered language throughout this presentation. Unfortunately, forced marriage is a gendered social problem where women and girls are disproportionately targeted and affected by this form of harm. And so for those reasons, we are going to be referring to, survivors or individuals as women and girls. But this doesn't, minimize or erase the experiences that men, boys, and individuals who are either gender conforming or non-binary may experience as well. And for general, context, forced marriage does happen for a variety complex reasons and is often shaped by individual families' beliefs, their traditions, societal expectations, and community norms. And it's often rooted in, just broader forms of inequality and control. So there is no single reason why a forced marriage may occur. And even if you're working with individuals among, the same community or religion, what might be tolerated in one household might not be tolerated in another. And not all forced marriages involve violence, like physical violence, and we can get into that throughout the presentation. Um, so because forced marriages, happen across, different cultures and communities, I want to, go over what we mean by what we say forced marriage. So this is the definition that grounds us in the work that we do. So we define a forced marriage as a marriage where one or both people do not or cannot consent to the marriage and typically involves elements of forced fraud or coercion. At Tahare, we do not equate the forced marriage process to the arranged marriage process. An arranged marriage is one where families may take the lead, but the ultimate choice to marry remains with that individual. So we find this terminology, very helpful as we are talking about what forced marriage is and how it is different from an arranged marriage. But it's important to remember that survivors may not use the terms forced marriage themselves. As advocates, we should remember to empower survivors to describe their situation in their own words. And it's really our role to listen for abuse, if there's any pressure going on, or coercion that's happening throughout the marriage process. So survivors may not ever say that I'm being forced to marry. They might refer to it as like a forced arranged marriage, an arranged marriage process. They also might not share that, or they might not share about their fears of the person that they're marrying, because whether they know about it or they're just not speaking to that person. Instead, they might focus on the family pressures that's happening to them. So the family control, whether that's, the financial control or pressures that's happening. They might even say that they're being sent away or their fear that they're going to be abandoned overseas. So that's why it's really important for us as advocates to assess whether the survivor has free and full consent throughout the marriage process. And when we are talking about consent, it's not just straightforward as what we might think. There are several different aspects to the marriage process that the individual is, consenting to. So this could be the marriage itself. This also includes the timing, the person that they are going to marry, and any other values that the person might hold. So this graphic was provided to us by Vidya Suri, who is a survivor and was attending Harvard at the time, and Dirakshan Raja, who was at the Urban Institute at the time of this continuum. And this continuum helps us understand how an arranged marriage process can turn into a forced marriage. So consent is key at all levels. Having the ability to freely express, their wishes, their preferences, or to reject a proposal altogether is really critical in this case. And the line between forced marriage and arranged marriage is not well, it can blur, especially in situations where there's, pressure or coercion happening, or fear if that's involved as well. So we have seen individuals, a lot of the times, well, not a lot of the times, but I have had a few clients who've shared that, they didn't mind that their parents were involved in the process. They didn't mind that they were taking the lead as well. However, they agreed on a specific timeline. And due to that family trigger, the timeline is now being forgotten, and families are moving forward without the free and full consent of the survivor. So I often say, like, for example, they are agreeing that the person can get married after college, but due to a specific reason, the families might be pressuring that person to marry right after high school. And in this case, they are missing out on college education, entirely, or it could be delayed. And then these changes doesn't always occur in a linear way. Forced marriages can, escalate pretty quickly, and the person can start off at stage one. And then due to that individual trigger, um, they could end up in stage eight in a matter of days and be forced into a marriage. So that's why it's really critical to assess, a survivor's experience, understand the context, and explore the level of freedom that they have in the decision-making process. And to ensure that, it's clear for all when we're, talking about consent, we mean at all levels. So it's, consenting to the individual that they're marrying. It's the timing and even the idea of getting married. Some survivors have expressed to me that they don't want to get married at all, and that's okay. So consent should be across the board, and they shouldn't, they should have the ability to express their wishes without fear of negative consequences. Either that's harm to themselves or a loved one as well. And just because a marriage is happening in a legal way, we should never assume that free and full consent is given to that marriage. So we can move on to explore how some of the reasons why a person may lack the ability to provide consent. And the first is they could be subjected to force, fraud, or coercion. Force is kind of straightforward. I do want to talk about, the fraud and coercion piece a little bit more in depth. And we often see family members will use the love that they have for um, family members will use the love that the individual has for their family in order to emotionally manipulate them. So some common examples that I see are, parents, they might threaten to self-harm or to end their own life. Something that's very common is like the mother is getting sick because they're not complying, or they're doing something against what the family wishes them to do. Um, for younger individuals, we often see like family members may threaten to cut off, financial support. And when someone who has been isolated and not allowed to work or become financially independent, that fear of losing that support can be very overwhelming, and some often may choose to remain in their situation. So for survivors with intellectual disabilities, we have seen family members use to exploit, family members may exploit that disability and use it as another, form of power and control over that person. I also seen on the other side where it's more of a misguided attempt or belief that, the marriage will ensure that the child is being taken care of in adulthood. The common phrase like through sickness and health, like spouses are supposed to take care of each other. Um, I've also worked with a handful of survivors as well who have shared with us that they were either involuntarily intoxicated or they were over or under medicated, and they don't remember the marriage process. It's, probably used to make them a little bit more compliant to marriage demands, and they don't remember or they don't, realize what was going on. And I also had a number of cases as well where survivors are signing marriage documents that they fully do not understand. And in a lot of those cases, it was in a language that was not their primary language, and they weren't given an interpreter or a translated version of that document. or they were intoxicated at the time as well. And then lastly, the individual could be below the legal age to marry in the state that they live in. And just for context, our marriage laws are determined state by state, so it really varies. And again, that's a whole topic in and of itself. So for case dynamics and coercive tactics can be very similar in the cases that in other forms of, violence against women and in cases that we see like domestic violence or human trafficking. However, the major difference for forced marriage cases is that coercion is being carried out by multiple members of the family, sometimes community members or friends as well. And there might not be a romantic partner, and I say that loosely and in quotes because individuals might not refer to them as romantic partners or view them as someone who's romantic in their eyes. Um, so family members, again, might be using that love that they have for the love that the survivor has for other family members to further control them. And, that coercion can be very subtle. It can also be prolonged. A lot of individuals tell me that the coercion starts when they're children, even if they don't get forced or the pressures don't start until they're in their adulthood. It could start at a very early age. So they might be experiencing, the emotional manipulation, threats, isolation, and any other family pressures. And a common thing that we see is that emotional blackmail piece, where a survivor, they're being told that they're ruining the family's reputation. They might be bringing shame to the family. They might be jeopardizing a younger sibling's marriage prospects. And that constant reminder can place an incredible toll and amount of responsibility on a survivor. And it makes them feel like their decision is affecting the entire family. And overall, that prolonged emotional and psychological impact, really affects their emotional and mental health well-being. Um, and as I mentioned before, for economic threats, that's also something that's, pretty common. Survivors, a lot of our clients tend to be on the younger side, and they might not be allowed to manage their own finances, or they might be, prohibited from seeking employment, or their finances might be controlled, like they have to give their paycheck to, family members. And, pursue, and they often also have, dreams of pursuing the higher education. And I've seen families, withhold like financial support or their tax documents for, the financial FAFSA application, um, and force them to comply with abusive marriage demands. And that pressure or that fear of losing that financial support may cause them to remain in, certain relationships or remain with the family because they might not have as many options. They might not know what, their rights are or what benefits they might have access to. And, again, they might remain in the situation.
Thank you, Bree. I really appreciated how you use the examples of the work that you're doing every single day with those impacted by forced marriage. And I'm wondering if folks who are on this call have worked with cases that have these similar dynamics, whether it's a forced marriage or not. When you think about those who you serve, where you're seeing maybe that deep emotional blackmail, I know that Brianna mentioned that we have currently a lot of clients on the younger side, but I have been with the program for 8 years, and I have had clients well into their 50s and 60s that also did not have access or to their tech or to their finances, or I should say, they were controlled through finances and tech and were not allowed to have their own independent of family or independent of that spouse who then was, an intimate partner who was violent. And so, wondering if folks who are on this call have had those experiences working with clients, or if these coercive tactics resonate with those you serve. And while you're, hoping while I'm hoping, excuse me, that you're utilizing, the chat, uh, I'm going to pass it back to Bree to go into a potential typical case.
Thank you. Yeah, so this next case scenario is something that we see very often, especially around this time of year with, school being out and, during the extended breaks like summer and winter break. So if we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to read the prompt. So Olivia is 18 years old and is a senior in high school, or in her senior year of high school. Her parents have always planned to arrange her marriage, but they recently started to pressure her to marry after high school graduation, despite their previous agreement to wait until after college. As Olivia becomes more resistant to the marriage, her parents threaten to withdraw financial support for her college education. Meanwhile, her family is preparing for a trip to the parents' home country the day after her graduation to visit a sick relative. While packing, Olivia noticed wedding-related gifts, leading her to suspect that a marriage may be arranged during the trip. With this new piece of information, Olivia is no longer wants to travel to her parents' home country, but does not know how to safely avoid the trip. Olivia reaches out to the local domestic violence hotline for help. So if you can put in the chat, first and foremost, like, what are you thinking? And you can also share how would you be able to assist Olivia, or if this case would present any challenges if someone like Olivia were to reach out to you. And I can share, as people are going through or are writing in the chat, some indicators that stand out to me that a forced marriage might be happening. And before all of this, I first and foremost would validate Olivia's concerns and commend her for trusting her instincts. A lot of times, our clients have a gut feeling that something is going to happen in the future, and sometimes they might not have evidence in that moment, but they just know something is happening. So for this, I will say, like, a strength for Olivia is that she's 18. She's able to access shelters on her own. Um, Another thing is that, the family is moving forward with marriage plans without her consent, despite their agreeing that it was going to happen after college. For me, the most glaring warning sign is that marriage might occur is the family is going to travel overseas, and they're not telling her the real reason. They're using the sick relative excuse as potentially like a guise for a marriage to happen when she gets there. That in combination with the wedding gifts. So if Olivia were to reach out to me, in our program asking for help, I would have a conversation with Olivia and ask her, what her concerns are about this trip, to better understand, why she fears travel and to better understand like the family dynamics and why her family wants her to get married and why they're moving forward despite, the agreement that they had. Um, I will also see what her wishes are about wanting to avoid the trip, and then safety plan with her. If she does want to avoid the trip, I will ensure that she has contact information for a local domestic violence shelter if your organization is able to, maybe give her like a safe phone just in case she needs it for any reason, especially since some clients are on, family phone plans. Um, and at this point, I would also have a discussion with her about how to explain her fears for future intimate partner violence as well, because she might not know. Um, there might not be a intended spouse at the moment, or she might not know. So this could be an opportunity where both, myself and Olivia call the domestic violence shelter together, and I can help, provide context about, forced marriage and how it relates to other forms of abuse and how this could be a form of a prevention opportunity. And then, as we are focusing on the immediate needs and avoiding the potential crisis and possibly relocation for Olivia, we can also work with her to discuss her goals, her wishes, and, just to identify some solutions that might keep some hope alive for her. So for this case, I see her desire to go to college and, have a higher education. So I often, connect with on-campus resources and liaise with different offices on campus. So that could look like, educating her about the difference between independent student status or dependent student. I can write a letter of support for financial aid, advocating for independent student status or getting the max amount of financial aid or scholarship that they might provide. Yeah. So with that, I will pass it off to my colleague Khalid to um, discuss more about the intersections of forced marriage.
Thank you so much, Brianna. I want to recognize that a few folks utilized the raised hand feature, and I would love for folks to use the chat. Apologies for that feature being locked a little bit earlier, and so I was able to see some of your comments. I saw we have wonderful colleagues from Narika on the line who have named working with this dynamics in the past, and so the chat should be open for everyone to share. And so for those of you who raised your hand, if you'd like to drop your questions or comment in the chat, we would greatly appreciate that, as it gives us a bit more of that history to be able to share with everyone, as well as opportunities for some further discussions at the end, or maybe one-on-one discussions with you and those that you work with, those you serve, or your colleagues. And so, Brianna gave us a wonderful, introduction into the work that we are doing here at the Forced Marriage Initiative. I believe the dynamics that Brianna shared at times may feel very unique to this type of abuse, while at the same time, they are not unique to the experiences of those who are impacted by gender-based violence. And so one of my goals and the goal of those of us here with the Forced Marriage Initiative is for everyone who is working with any and all survivors to know more about this issue, because it never is happening on its own. And often folks are presenting to service providers with another issue, whether that is domestic violence, whether that is family violence, whether that is, sexual assault or dating violence. Often folks are contacting a hotline similar to the case we just discussed, and they may not be using the quote unquote advocate talk. They may not name, I have been abused by my family in this way. This is how they're utilizing power and control over me, and this is what I fear. That is very rare. I know that for my program, it's actually not rare because we are called the Forced Marriage Initiative. And so people are coming to us directly naming, marriage. But when they are contacting, again, service providers, that may not be what's first coming to mind. It may be the child abuse. It may be, again, the family violence that's happening. It may be a situation that you can pick up quickly as this is familial perpetrated trafficking, or maybe this is trafficking because there is a financial gain. There is that is the center of the transaction where marriage is being used. And so, again, the forced marriage often does not present first, and it's really important for us to figure out ways of asking about marriage at intake, at the assessment process, at time of, of that initial contact, because we could be in a really unique place to be able to prevent a future intimate partner violence or a future sexual assault that will happen. And so, forced marriage, again, is just one part of the abuse history that someone impacted by forced marriage will experience. And sadly, the other types of abuse that we may be more um, uh, commonly working with is what presents first. But if we're not asking about the onset of marriage, if our questions are honing in on romance or the relationship and not necessarily on the network that may be abusing this person, or the network of perpetrators, or the network of family members who are the ones pressuring the person to comply, we are going to miss opportunities to truly provide that holistic trauma-informed care that we all hope to provide. And so let's dig a little bit deeper into the different ways that we see forced marriage intersect with other types of violence. While not every single person who works with our program or who has interacted with us has, named that they were, physically abused as a child, it is rare for us to work with someone that has not named that they can now look back and think about coercive tactics that occurred in childhood. And so it's very important to know this, whether you work with children or not, because you could be working with an adult survivor who has not disclosed to you that experience as a child and those adverse childhood experiences that are still impacting the way that they respond to our care and the way that they really move around in the world and their journey to healing and really that journey to living the lives that they want for themselves. And so it's very important to know this. I will name that working with children, working with minors is incredibly tough. We do work with minors in our program, but often they do not have the evidence that our victim services systems are wanting or needing, and so it can be very tough. However, it is not impossible to work with children and to assist them, but that is a whole training in itself. And if we would like to have a training on child marriage and specifically naming child abuse and how we work with survivors who are children, I'm happy to do so. Just please name that in the chat or write us, and we will host that part two and focus on child marriage. When it comes to rape and sexual assault, this is one where it's I think pretty clear whenever someone is entering, or if someone is entering a marriage that they did not consent to, that they do not want, they are sadly going to be victims of sexual assault because of the expectations within that marriage. There is expectation, or there are expectations of maybe that intimate partner, that partner's family, your own family, that lead to that person having, sadly, going through a rape and or sexual assault. And so I name this as a very unique moment of prevention, because if you're getting a call similar to that case that Brianna talked about, Olivia, right? Getting a call that says, I fear this travel that's coming up. nothing has happened to me yet with that intimate partner. We know coercive tactics have happened already with the family, but that intimate partner has not abused Olivia yet, right? And so it's a very unique moment of prevention to be in a space where we can actually know there's going to be a future sexual assault and assist someone from that occurring, right? It's rare that we have these moments. And so I named this because, again, it's so critical to ask the right questions early on, to ask about the fears, to ask about the onset of marriage with the hopes that we can be that person that truly can assist a survivor, a person impacted from going through this rape, sexual assault, and future intimate partner violence. When it comes to rape and sexual assault, we also see this type of abuse be a cause for a forced marriage. Sadly, we have worked with individuals who have been assaulted at times by family members, at times by community members, even religious leaders, and the family has blamed that victim, that survivor, and uses marriage to quote unquote fix the issue and to keep that perpetrator from facing maybe criminal charges, or at least they think they can do so through marriage. And so, again, rape and sexual assault is certainly at the intersection of forced marriage. I think it's pretty clear how domestic and family violence can manifest, the forms of abuse, the tactics used, everything that Brianna named earlier when she was setting the ground for us to get to this point is very much similar to that power and control, the abuse that us as domestic violence or family violence, prevention advocates, learn or educate ourselves to be able to provide that sort of assistance to those in need of services. And so this is a wonderful way of being able to see how forced marriage and domestic and family violence like very much fit together. I hear a lot of times folks making the quick connection between forced marriage and human trafficking. And yes, that may be the case sometimes, but not all the time. But all the time, I'm seeing the family violence connection because it is family members, it is a web of family members who are utilizing that close proximity to that survivor to continue to exploit, manipulate, isolate, to stalk, to utilize that close proximity to then report back to other members of the family, to the head of households, and keep that person in line or keep them from believing that they have any other way of being able to escape this, the future that that family wants for them. And sometimes that is a future that the family paints as a beautiful picture. They paint it as, this is what's best for you. But again, if someone is naming, I don't want this for myself, I truly do not have the option of freely expressing my wishes, we know there's a lack of consent, which means there is abuse, there are coercive or manipulative tactics that are being used. Dating violence is a form of abuse that I would say Brianna and I are seeing a lot more often, in that we are working with individuals who are dating a chosen partner, and that chosen partner then becomes abusive, and that chosen partner then utilizes the knowledge that they may have of the family, maybe objecting to dating, or the family's meaning conservative ways or values, and that dating partner that once was chosen uses that information to then manipulate, to then ask for maybe explicit pictures, to then ask the person to remain in that relationship, to truly force them to remain in a dating relationship or even marriage that they do not want out of fear. And this could be minors or adults. We've worked in situations where the perpetrator who was the dating partner was a minor, but also a minor who was abusive and harming the individual that we were working with. And so important to note how dating violence can also manifest in situations where there are chosen partners that then utilize that, again, close proximity and the information that they know to get the individual to comply. And these last 2 points I will go into quickly because they truly are, trainings in themselves. But we have seen situations where someone is also a survivor of female genital mutilation or cutting, and that is a procedure that often goes hand in hand with preparation of marriage or can happen more than once throughout the marriage process. And so if you are assessing for female genital cutting, I would say please also assess the dynamics related to marriage within that community. And if you need some resources related to FGM or FGMC, please reach out to us. We are happy to connect you with wonderful partner organizations, wonderful survivor-led organizations that truly are experts in this space. Think when it comes to trafficking, it's pretty simple to understand, the means, the actions, the purpose, and to see where marriage can fit in that. There are many situations where we've worked with individuals who name their situation as trafficking, or they call it, family perpetrated trafficking. What we have also seen is marriage be used as a guise for forced labor and situations where someone is a trafficking victim and also marriage was used in the process to traffic them, to get them to work, to not, pay them, to overwork, right? To truly financially, harm, that person. We have also seen situations where the family has used marriage to settle a debt. However, even in situations where money is exchanged, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a trafficking situation because the purpose of the marriage may not be financial gain for the family. They may be other dynamics at play that are not related to, again, that means that action, the purpose that would be needed for a situation to truly be considered human trafficking. However, trafficking service providers and trafficking resources have been very helpful to those we serve. Often, when we are working with someone who has that like future fear of violence, trafficking organizations have been wonderful partners of ours and allowing individuals to, go to shelter there to receive that sort of case management support because they can see that correlation. While at the same time, we know that not every survivor wants to name their situation as trafficking or name their parents or their family members as traffickers, right? And so it's a balance that we um, have to be able to share with folks how abuse manifests and the different definitions that we may have for certain types of abuse, while at the same time, it is on us to honor and respect the wishes of those who are impacted by forced marriage. I'm going to provide a very brief glance at the legal landscape and happy to share more. But just so folks have a good understanding of, well, what laws are there or what could we do or how can we ensure that someone who comes to our program can receive services? At least I'm hoping that those are the questions that you are asking yourself by now. What I will start is by naming a true joy of ours, which is that in the 2022 reauthorization of VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, forced marriage was defined. The first time forced marriage was defined in federal law, and this named forced marriage as a cause or consequence of the VAWA crimes, meaning domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. I share this because it is incredibly important for our program to share with everyone working with individuals who may be at risk of gender-based violence that this is now in VAWA and with the hopes that you can begin to ask more questions about the onset of marriage and potentially have better data with your own center, your own communities, the individuals that you serve, with the hopes that that there are opportunities that open themselves up for more funding, right? So you can actually name, we are serving individuals impacted by forced marriage, and perhaps those opportunities related to funding can open up, or we can better partner together. If you're thinking about, well, what are some ways that I could help someone? I would tell you that you would help a survivor of forced marriage or someone impacted by forced marriage very similarly to how you would protect and or help a survivor of domestic or sexual violence, right? Every state has, protection orders. Every state has federal or state laws that are related to the crimes that may occur in a forced marriage situation. So whether that's kidnapping or trafficking or the rape or sexual assault that I named, or maybe abduction or, you name it. And so thinking about what are the crimes that are occurring, knowing how this type of abuse intersects with other forms of violence can open up the opportunities for us to provide resources and options. Now, civil protection orders are wonderful. They are a way that is less, I think, less heavy for those that we serve to, or I should say those we serve are more open at times to civil protection orders or orders of protections because, they're not, there's no criminal consequence, right? And we're talking again about family members who they love and care about, and often they just want the abuse to stop, the pressure to stop, with keeping some sort of connection to that family. Not everyone, but for the most part, there is that hope. And so protection orders are a wonderful way of empowering folks with some sort of legal document that prevents abuse. However, I have to say that not every case that I've worked with has been um, like approved to receive a protection order. At times when it is, you have that family violence, when you don't have that intimate partner, when you have that future fear and you can't necessarily name specific types of harm that have come your way, folks may not get that protection order, which is um, why, some of our work is related to looking at how we can expand, protection orders and maybe name them specific to um, to those impacted by forced marriage. Now, uh, it is important to note that there are criminal laws in some states that do name forced marriage. Not every state. I believe there's about 11 states and DC that name, maybe forcing or coercing someone into marriage, but usually this is tucked into those human trafficking definitions. And I actually have not seen my 8 years at Tahere a situation where someone was charged criminally because of the forced marriage only. I've seen the accompanying harms, right? The trafficking, the abduction, or the kidnapping. And I think it's really important to name that not every survivor wants to pursue criminal charges. However, knowing the laws can be very helpful in bargaining potentially with family, in folks being able to name what you're doing is illegal, what you're doing is unlawful. And maybe you haven't done or committed a crime yet, but if you do this, or if you take this person, over state lines, if you take this person overseas, this is what potentially you could be charged with. And that can be very powerful for advocates to use as they're working with those who are in like future fear of of a forced marriage. I'm very excited to name our work with the Child Marriage Prevention Act of 2026. This is a federal bill that is critical to ensuring there's sustained attention and resources in the movement to end child marriage in the United States. And it's for the federal government to pull those legal levers that are in their control so that our laws are protecting girls, are protecting those individuals from harm instead of facilitating that. And so this is very exciting. We've been doing this work for many, many years in consultation with many survivors and members of the Forced Marriage Working Group, which we chair at Tahereh. And so, for more on the Child Marriage Prevention Act, I believe my colleague will drop in the chat the link to the webinar that's fully focused on the Child Marriage Prevention Act and also gives folks a call to action so you can also support these efforts because it's truly, truly time for us to uh, stop ignoring our own homegrown problem of child marriage right here in the United States. Bree, I'd like to pass it back to you to get into a bit of screening and responding while I'm also cognizant of the time. And so, could you maybe get into just some considerations that folks should have when they are asking about this type of abuse?
Yeah, so when you're working with survivors, it's, really important that you're approaching the conversation um, in a way that's, being curious, compassion, and non-judgmental. Um, and if a survivor who is happens to be a minor reaching out, it's really important to let them know if you're a mandatory reporter, and let them know that what's going to happen with their case, how the process goes, so that they can make that informed decision if they should continue to disclose what's happening within their family situation. Even if Oh, it's also helpful for a survivor, to have their input as you are making like a safety plan or asking them how they want to handle their situation because they are the experts in their own family dynamics. And them being able to provide that insight is really critical to next steps. And as you're working with individuals, even if, there's like a helpful family member or a community member, it's important to avoid including, family members or community members, even if the community members are of the same background. Families who discover that their child is seeking help, they might escalate marriage demands or shut the individual out of marriage plans or the process altogether. And that could create more like anxiety and fear of the unknown. And every situation is unique, and we never want to act as a mediator, especially if you're not part of the same community as them. Um, yeah, and when we are asking, um, we shouldn't be scared to ask. A lot of people on this call may be in a position to have conversations with individuals. And if we're not asking about the onset of marriage, then we're really missing a critical piece of their trauma history. And this just helps strengthen, case management, safety planning with them, and just the overall healing process. And we really encourage people to include this in their screening and intake documents so that you're assessing everyone who's coming into your program and not, you know, reinforcing certain biases. And you're over asking in one area or one population and under asking in another. And just keep in mind that if you ask directly, like, are you being forced to marry? That might not get the disclosure that you're seeking. We really encourage, advocates to have, open conversations. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Bria. I think it's really important to keep that in mind that we have to have those open conversations. And I think we're both trying to hone in the importance of asking about the onset of marriage. I was going through the chat a little bit and saw some folks naming, that they may not have the ability to focus on prevention, and I get that. I also came from a domestic violence shelter that was not focused on family violence, and folks who contacted our hotline were not able to receive that emergency service in that way. However, I have also seen the work that Brianna does and being able to perhaps do that call with the survivor, with the person at risk, to name how they have maybe there is a partner who is chosen. So there is technically maybe an intimate partner that's chosen, but that survivor is not naming them as an intimate partner. Or perhaps their situation does not fit that IPV shelter provider, but maybe we can contact that trafficking service provider in the area or outside of the city to make that warm transfer, that warm connection, even if it is just a few days or just a weekend, so that person has a safe place to go to. And so, for me, it's really important that we see ourselves as, liaisons to those who are impacted by forced marriage, especially if they're calling us and we are not a provider who can um, work with them directly, because prevention work, it may not be how we're set up. At the same time, I do want to name the opportunity in better collecting data, in asking about the onset of marriage. So perhaps with now forced marriage being included as a cause or consequence of the VAWA crimes, maybe we can think of opportunities that to expand our our services. And so I love this slide. It's a slide that really has been created from the work that we do directly with those we serve. If you take anything from this training, I hope is that it's never all families, it's never one specific culture, background, you name it. Uh, Culture is never an excuse for abuse. People who may be who are impacted by forced marriage are also part of the culture or background or family that they represent, and they have a right to name what feels safe, what feels healthy for their life, for their future. They can love their family, they can love their culture, they can love their faith, whatever that may be. And at the same time, they can also say some traditions, some expectations do have an expiration date, and it is um, it is our job to not fear being racist, to not fear being culturally insensitive, uh, and turn folks away because of those fears, rather to be open. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, but what we can always know is that everyone has a right to live a life that is free of abuse, and we should never judge them. We should educate them about their rights, about their options. We should validate those feelings and utilize the tools that we have in our toolkit as service providers to make healthy connections for folks, whether that is us working with you, us working with those individuals directly, or connecting to other wonderful partners around the nation who have expertise with this type of abuse. And so, again, I truly appreciate your time. I know that we are right on time, but I would love to take a moment and see if there are questions in the chat. I welcome my colleague Brianna to come back on screen. And if there is a question that perhaps we may be able to answer. I think throughout we've answered some of this. I'm seeing that. Thank you, Bree. You have also named some answers here. I'm seeing some wonderful folks from Indiana here. Thank you so much for being here. We have some wonderful partners there, a very powerful advocate, Genevieve, who is doing great work in Indiana. I'm also seeing folks from Narica in California. And again, thank you for the support. Bree, is there any like final maybe takeaway before we stop the webinar, and I will commit myself to going through this chat and seeing if there are questions that I could answer one-on-one, and perhaps if folks are open to it, scheduling just like a roundtable meeting, not recorded, to maybe have a deeper discussion. But before I do so, Bree, do you have a takeaway that you'd like to share with folks?
Yeah, just one takeaway would be that um, you might be working with somebody who is impacted by forced marriage, and you wouldn't know until you ask. So, yeah, I would just say continue to ask and try to incorporate these questions into your intake documents.
Thank you so much, Bree, and thank you everyone for being here with us. I know it's a lot of information at once. We truly tried our best to keep this to 1 hour, while we also can expand on so many areas of this work, whether that is deep case management discussions, whether that is more on laws, whether you want to learn more about child marriage and that work. If you are interested in a part two, please feel free to email us. Our email is very simple. It's right on the screen. It's FMI, the Forced Marriage Initiative, at taharay.org. The phone number on the screen goes directly to Brianna. The email on the screen goes directly to both of us. And so we are very open to hearing from folks and what would be helpful to continue these sort of trainings. And so if a part two is something you're interested in, whether you want it to be more expanded on what we discuss, or if you like something totally different, happy to do so, because there's just so much that we can really get into. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here with us. I truly appreciate everyone who's on this call, and look forward to working together and really ensuring that those impacted by forced marriage have the ability to access the services that they truly deserve. Thank you all. Bye bye.